All right, I just mentioned it here before the break. Dan Bongino. He is focusing heavily now. Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI. Illegal alien criminals, child predators, the target. Child predators are the target. Paul Hutchinson joined me now, the executive producer of The Sound of Freedom and the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation. Paul, nice to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to see you again.
It's good to see you and all the work you've done. Sound of Freedom, what an eye-opening experience, and not in a good way. I'm glad that one had a happy ending. Too many do not. But what about the FBI's 764 Predator investigation and Dan Bongino and all the others saying, look, we're cracking down on these predators, these human traffickers. There's got to be some feeling of optimism in there for you.
I wish, we're fighting a dark war. And Steve, this is the 764. It's not just a group. This is an ideology. There are hundreds of organizations just like this all over the internet that are targeting children, that are using sextortion and other things to be able to blackmail them and get them to do worse and worse things. In fact, this is one that is not just getting the children to send explicit photos and then they blackmail those to get more. The 764 and other organizations like this are blackmailing children to go as far as mutilating their pets, mutilating themselves, and even suicide. This is a very evil movement of people trying to topple the good governments and create chaos. It's a cult. It's a Satanistic ideology that is targeting our children, and it's incredibly important for us as parents to be aware of these things so that we can keep our children safe.
So 250 investigations and counting from the FBI. That's what's been reported here in the last few days into 764. By the way, created in 2021. And apparently this has to do with a zip code in Texas. I'm not sure about all of this, but
it was a 15-year-old kid. It was a 15-year-old kid who he lived in that zip code, decided we look at what's coming into our homes through our media, through Hollywood and others
right.
that are targeting our children and their mindset. And all of a sudden, now this kid, he's been arrested. He's got 80 years in prison now.
How old is he now?
He's now over 20 years old. He's over 20 now. This was like 5 years ago when he first put together the organization. But understand this.
Hold on, I got to ask you this. Was he a victim originally? Is that what spawned this?
Here, Steve, that's the problem globally. When I was I led 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries.
Right.
And I came to an understanding that sadly, the victims were victims themselves. Now, this doesn't justify their behavior in any way. I tell people, listen, I'm not a sympathizer of anybody who harms a child. However, if we're going to fix this problem, we need to understand where it's coming from.
Break the cycle.
People hurting other people. Yes, we've got to break that cycle. We've got to keep our children safe. And if they're sucked into something like this, we need to get them the help they need immediately. I talk about that in depth in the Sound of Freedom book that's coming out next month, in depth about what we can do as parents to keep our children safe, what kind of things that we can identify when they're going off track, and what we need to do as humanity to fix this problem, because it is a generational problem with hurt people hurting other people.
Yeah, sextortion, cybercrime, child sexual exploitation, assault, kidnapping, even murder. Associated with the 764 group and all of its darkness, to say the least. They target kids 8 to 17 generally, but, I don't think they have any boundaries per se. How do we break groups like this? And this is just one of many. How do they get kids to, they've got carving their own names and so forth into their arms, so they call it basically a form of branding, if you will.
Absolutely.
So there's subjugation to this group. How do we get a child that far gone into a group like this?
Sadly, when you're not paying attention to your kids, these things start to happen. People will leave the movie Sound of Freedom, or they'll finish reading the book The Sound of Freedom, and they'll say, okay, what do I want to do something. Well, the worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and try to go undercover and rescue kids. You're going to get shot. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. because the majority of kids that get trafficked come from broken homes and runaways and a broken foster care program. And children in our own homes are being targeted with their gaming platforms. This is where a lot of things like the 764 get their victims, is they go onto these gaming platforms pretending to be another 12-year-old, another 13-year-old, and extorting your child into sending explicit photos and then saying, listen, these are going to go other places unless you send more explicit, more, and pretty soon. And they actually get promoted within their organizations, the 764 and other organizations. These predators will get promoted based on how far they can get these kids to go. And when I say how far, all the way to murder, all the way to suicide. The FBI has identified this as a domestic terrorism situation. One of the biggest problems that we face as America, yet the U.S. doesn't even, most parents haven't even heard of stuff like this. So it's so important that we're paying attention to what our kids are doing online. It's so important that we have a relationship with them where they can come to us and say, hey, this doesn't feel right. This happened. You know, I screwed up, Dad. Sorry, I sent this picture, but now it's going worse and worse and worse because these guys will not stop, because they're getting accolades from their other 764 guys. And some of these children have been found to then become perpetrators. These guys have so much dirt, quote unquote, on these kids that they then push them to try to do other things like bomb threats or suicides or mutilating other kids, etc. This is happening all the time, and we need to be aware of the online threats that are happening in our country.
Absolutely true. You know, is there nothing we can do? You look at an Elon Musk. You look at something. These are very bright people that have created systems. And look, there's got to be some way that AI can help us root some of this stuff out, I would think. I mean, there are things that can help us here, you would think. I mean, I don't know, Paul, but I feel like there's something we can do besides just sitting idly by or sending rescue missions into Mexico to save one child in 1,000 or whatever it turns out to be, right?
Absolutely. Well, and again, us as parents can do something every day by having that healthy relationship with our kids. But yes, I believe that things like child trafficking could be eradicated immediately with the technology that we have today. We've got AI. We have, I mean, literally, I walked through 3 airports yesterday and I didn't even take out my ID. Why? Because boom, they had my face flashed up on whatever camera that was there and immediately was pushed through. I came into the country. And so they have the ability to be able to track what's going on if they put the resources into really fixing this problem. This online predator stuff, this could go away immediately. So yes, we need to do more individually in our families, in our communities, and in our governments to keep our children safe.
And pay close attention to what your kids are doing online. Look, you might look innocent, but they can click off a screen as soon as you walk in the room. You need to have access. We do. If you have minor children in the house, you have access to what if they don't like it, too bad. Paul Hutchinson, really appreciate you being here. I do. Don't be so long between visits. I mean, we need to talk about this more. I mean, it's
I would love that.
It's destroying lives, Paul. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, but Paul Hutchinson, he's the executive producer of The Sound of Freedom. The internet is a dark and dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing. Can be life-altering and not in a good way. I'll take a break and be back on The Steve Gruber Show.